Hi guys and welcome to my channel. This tutorial is on triangle pose, that standing pose that is quite often found in beginners classes or any classes, but actually has quite a complex alignment to it. So this tutorial is trying to bust some myths and help you find a little bit more ease in your triangle shape. So firstly, what's the purpose of triangle pose? If we think about it anatomically, I'll show you into the shape. So we're lengthening the hamstring of this front leg, we're stretching the inner thigh or the adductors of the front leg as well, and then the side body is being particularly lengthened on this top side as we roll the chest back, and then when the arm is in the sky we also get a nice chest opener. Because of this shape that the torso is taking, the core is having to work quite hard to not only stabilize us because the balance is perhaps a little tricky, but it's also to hold the torso out in this direction. This arm is not responsible for holding up the torso, our core is. So let's have a look at the alignment of this pose, starting with the foundations, which is our feet. Triangle pose is often sequenced after warrior two, because the alignment in the feet is the same. So the front foot points forwards and the back foot points off towards one side, so the foot is in line with the short edge of your mat. The feet are what I like to call on a tightrope. So the front foot is in line with the arch of the back foot on that one line. If you have one of those mats that has a line down the center, that helps you find the alignment of where your feet should be. The distance between our feet is not an exact science. There is no right and wrong. Generally, the further apart our feet are, the more challenging the pose is going to be in terms of the flexibility required and the strength to hold your body into that pose. Therefore, beginners are probably going to prefer a slightly shorter stance than their warrior two to give their front hamstring and front inner thighs a fighting chance into the stretch. So that's the alignment of our foundation, but then what about our hips? And this is where we get to a topic of a little bit of contention. The hips face ever so slightly off to one side. So if I place my hands onto my hips here, you can see that my pelvis is facing this direction. It's definitely not facing this direction. As you see, as I try to demonstrate that, my leg has gone into some weird, twisted knee, not happy position. Many textbooks may say that the pelvis faces the side, but I don't feel that's a realistic position or shape for most people's bodies. If we think about what that would require, for my pelvis to point directly outwards, this leg would need to be in, let's say, a middle split position. Imagine my legs completely out to one side. That would be what I would need in this left hip. And quite simply, I don't have that range, and neither do many people at all. Therefore, the hips point slightly off towards the top corner, and when we think of entering the pose, of which I'll get to in a moment, this top hip stays pointing slightly over there. We can think of the hip rolling back, but it's definitely not right hip on top of left hip. It stays at this diagonal angle. So let's have a look at that actual entry. Once we've set our feet at perhaps whatever distance we like, slightly shortening them, sending our arms nice and wide, just like our warrior two alongside our shoulders. I like to think of it as a surfing movement. So my front fingertips, I'm going to surf my body forwards. I found length in the top side of my torso, but I've also found length in the bottom side of my torso. I'm trying to not crunch into this side of the body. Once I've surfed as far forwards as I can and created all this length, my torso now has nowhere else to go. This is where my torso is going to stay. It's then simply my arms, my hand comes to find a point of contact, which we'll get to, and the right arm or other arm goes nice and high towards the sky. This is when we can think of rolling the top body open, so rib cage rolls back. We can think of rolling that hip back slightly to find a little bit extra length in this top side of the hip. But remember what we say about the pelvis, it's allowed to stay pointing towards that top corner. So it's a topic of contention about where this front hand can rest. Before we talk about the places that it can rest onto the leg, I want to think about engaging the muscles of this front leg. When we're stretching the hamstring, as we would be in this front leg, we want to make sure that the quad is engaged, particularly in triangle pose where we're loading weight over the leg, where the knee is taking some sort of directional force down towards the mat. So by engaging the quad, lift the kneecap up towards the hip. That enables more stability in the knee joint and stops it being able to essentially bend the wrong way. The knee only bends in one direction. This way, it does not bend the other. So when we come to talk about where the hand can rest, it can rest anywhere. It can rest towards the thigh, if perhaps this is our hamstring stretch limit. It can rest towards shin. I like to offer the option of a block, as that's a nice stable place that is not a body part. If we think about the hand resting to the knee, I would say it's not problematic in most people's bodies. When we've engaged that muscle in the quad, the knee is stable, but we're not dumping our body weight into this hand. Our core is holding up, or should be holding up, the weight of our torso, and this hand is merely a stabilizer. Perhaps if you're very new to the pose and your core strength is perhaps not holding you up so well, maybe that's a good time to avoid that knee joint, because we don't want to be pressing our knee backwards. But always remember that this hand is meant to be light. It's just meant to be touching, and therefore a little bit of pressure onto the knee, like I say, in most people's bodies will not be problematic. Whilst we're on the topic of where that hand can go, some variants that you might see in the way people practice triangle pose is their hand is sometimes to the inside of the foot, next to the big toe. In other people, their hand would be to the outside of the foot, next to the little toe. This is personal preference, but my advice is that to take the hand to the outside of the foot would be advancing the pose. You're going to need more flexibility to guide your body into that more rotational ability into the torso. So hand next to your big toe is the best place to start. And then one final thing to consider with the alignment of our triangle pose is triangle is not a fold. We're not folding our body down towards the floor. As I've sort of described in a few different ways, we roll the body open. So one thing that we can often see in triangle pose, and it's usually because we're trying to get our hand closer to the floor, remembering that there really is no need for our hand to be anywhere near the floor, is you'll see people enter the pose, and then to get this hand a little lower, they'll start folding the body down towards the leg or down towards the floor, and then their arm is up like this, and it's a little bit of a hybrid of I don't know what. So the triangle pose is not a fold. Let that hand be supported either higher onto a block or higher onto your leg, so that you can open the chest to the sky and keep this side body rolling on top of the other side. I hope you found this helpful. Let me know what you thought in the comments. If you'd like to see some other tutorials of this style, check out this playlist here, or you could take one of my classes on this side just here. I'd really appreciate if you give the video a little thumbs up if you found it helpful, and don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to hear each time I release some new content.